here.
Action.
Welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast. This is a special episode because it's our second this week.
Have we ever done that?
Yeah, we've had weeks where we've done stuff. I got a text message from Jeopardy James Holzhauer.
Oh, I did too. Wait, what did yours say?
It said, now I know why they call him Seth Burn.
Oh my God. I think mine said the exact same thing.
It's the same guy sending us the same text message. What is that? Why is that a big deal?
I don't know. It's funny. He said, I guess we know why they call him Seth Burn. I said,
I don't understand why that's so weird. He sent us the same text message.
Yeah.
It's not really like the simplicity of your mind sometimes is perplexing and also amusing. Speaking of simplicity of your mind, do we want to recap the Seth Burn now that we mentioned him, just because it's or do we want to jump into the election? I guess the election's more interesting. The Seth Burn thing, I think if we replay it, I haven't listened to it. You should probably listen to it. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I listened to a little bit of it because I was trying to find some clip where he talked about goat blowers.
Oh yeah, that was a good line.
Yeah.
He said, once you're a goat blower, it doesn't, I mean, you're always a goat blower. And I said, we haven't had any goat blowers on the podcast to my knowledge.
So basically,
but it's potentially, maybe we have. I don't know.
Maybe. We don't know. No admitted goat blowers. But it sounds like there's a certain list of things that if you do that, you're labeled that. Like goat blowers on that list, I would think like murderer, like rapist.
No, I mean,
like serial killer. But
so,
if you were, and I guess tout, right? I guess according to Seth Burn.
No, I mean, it's not. Okay, so
it's not the severity, but it's the kind of he thinks it's that a label that sticks.
We haven't had the tout conversation in a long time, right? And I think for a while it was a very tired conversation for us. The Cville thing, people have asked like who they are. It's a community on Twitter that are, Contrarianville, I think is what it stands for. They are, I'd say pretty witty, pretty intelligent people, but also very dogmatic in their beliefs. And their beliefs are that touts 100%, inarguably wrong. And anytime you associate one with one, even if it's a past one, that makes you guilty by association. So in their world, Pizzola and Cheetah, who are our friends and who are on the show, and we think are net positives, unlike us, for the sports betting media industry, our association with them makes us guilty. And again, like, it isn't really even that interesting a conversation because they're so dogmatic about it. And I guess the thing that you always talk about is and you and I have argued about like the different kind of touts. You think Vegas Dave is like the most harmful tout. And we've had these arguments where like an Aaron Schatz is a more harmful tout than a Vegas Dave, not intentionally, but Aaron portrays himself as someone that can provide value to you to beat the spread. And because he has quote unquote analytics attached to him, it gives him, even more credibility. But the reality is his picks generally have not done particularly well against the spread historically.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this ad nauseum in the past, but
you're still in Vegas. You're still in Aaron Schatz camp over Vegas Dave.
I mean, I think Aaron Schatz's site provides value.
That's not the question.
You're separating it out into. I mean, so if you buy a subscription to Football Outsiders, you're buying, I believe, subscription to like premium data and premium stats and their forecasts and stuff, as well as projections against the spread.
But I think they had a separate package where they were selling picks.
I mean, I like reading their almanac every year of team previews. We have had this conversation about whether the stuff that they produce is valuable. Certainly DVOA as a stat was, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but it was certainly
the first of its kind in football that really used. I mean, what it did was add the concepts of success, right? Like DVOA adds play success as like a and somewhat contextualizes statistics based on play success.
Yeah.
So, anyways, okay.
If you're wondering if you're interacting with people in Cville on Twitter, if you see words spelled incorrectly intentionally, like sprats or gambooling, then that's Cville. That's kind of their code.
And if they're mean to you and they make you feel like you're an idiot, it's probably Cville also. Oh, Toledo just scored. This is going to be a good sweat for the fourth quarter. Anyways, anything else on that? I mean, I think we both have a lot of respect for Seth Burn. I think we think he's an intelligent, really intelligent person who is, in our minds, a net positive to the sports betting world. But certainly, he took us to task, and I think it was fine.
Yeah, I mean, he says harsh but fair. He says harsh but fair, right? But the question is he? And I mean, does he think he's a net positive? Because it turns out
that he cares.
So Brian Bullock, whose podcast he's appeared on in the past, like Brian Bullock has a list of all the people he's had, and it turns out he's had Cheetah on. And so when Seth saw this, he said it's inexcusable on his part. So
yeah, but I mean, anyways, okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to the election.
Okay.
So you made a point that you believed that this was, and the reason we did this whole election podcast was you believed that this was a Mayweather situation.
Yeah, I thought the markets had it
Mayweather McGregor situation where this was like a once in a lifetime betting opportunity, and the odds were, way too short on Biden, and you wanted to empty the farm on Biden.
Yeah, and I think for a few reasons, Jeff, and if you look at sort of these events that have extremely large handle and a larger percentage of square handle, and not just square, but like people that don't normally bet, such as the World Cup and the Super Bowl, you can get some prices that are like pretty far from what they should be. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So the World Cup is a lot less efficient of a betting market than, say, like a Premier League game.
So the World Cup, the Super Bowl, the Mayweather McGregor, big boxing matches, probably, especially like that one.
Like,
sure.
So
that's
premise one.
Factor number one.
Premise two.
In your mind, hold on. In your mind, here's the thing that the ability to bet on this present election was not as easy as it would be to bet on the World Cup or the Super Bowl. So the ability to get a recreation.
You can't bet you can't
bet legally in the United States,
not in the U.S. But
you're saying the square money was outside of the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the side. Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of these offshore books, I heard they said that this was one of for some of these books, if not the biggest handle they've had on any event.
Okay.
So
that's interesting.
They took big liability and were willing to, they were willing to have a ton of liability on one side as well. And the other thing is it's an event that is not, I don't want to say there's not a lot of data, but if you think elections do not happen often, and if you look at things that are easy to forecast and where you have more efficient markets, it's in things where there's a good feedback loop, where people make a prediction, get feedback, make another prediction, get feedback, and from there you can tune your models and calibrate them, and you have a good idea. You have a better calibrated model and a better idea of the uncertainty. And if you're predicting like the oil prices 20 years in the future, somebody doing that is probably not going to be that great at predicting because he's got to wait 20 years to get that feedback and he's not getting it. And so in my mind, this election is something that is, especially given the circumstances, and I guess we can get into the live betting and the impact of COVID and the mail-in ballots on that. But it's something that is.
So you just said two things, right? You said one, really public event like the Super Bowl. Two was not a weak ability to get a feedback loop. So
can I add a third too? There's the notion of people to see things like that are not certainties as closer to 50-50. I mean, that's sort of a psychological bias, a heuristic. We tend to cluster probabilities around 50%, or like we tend to think of things as certain or not certain. If it's not certain, it's close to 50-50. If it's certain, it's, certain. But this was clearly not considered a certain thing. And so people tend to think, oh, we don't know 50%.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, I think you saw that with Mayweather McGregor. They were like, well, he's got a chance.
Sure. Okay. So now that you've seen what transpired over the last, 24 hours, roughly, maybe
more than that, like 30 hours, maybe
30 hours. Now that you've had a chance to see that, do you still think, your initial assessment was correct if you were put in the same position? I mean, if you could rewind, knowing a little bit about how the day went, would you bet it again?
Well, first off, I probably wouldn't have reacted like as I did early in the night.
I mean, everyone wanted to give you shit. Everyone wanted me to give you shit for basically being a drama king. And
look, Jeff, you're sweating a game right behind you. I was sweating the election, and
I was sweating a little bit. I've never heard you sweat something like that before. Like, this was an all-time sweat for you, and I understand why. There was a lot of emotion attached to it.
Yeah, it wasn't just money for me either.
Right. So is that a good idea to tie that much money to something you care about that much outside of the money?
But also, I mean, it just kind of felt like deja vu from 2016. And so it seemed like when things started moving that way in 2016, it kind of accelerated, and the same thing happened. The markets went from Biden minus 200 or so to Trump minus 700 pretty quickly. It was just like, boom.
Okay,
then it stabilized.
But you didn't answer my question, which is, do you feel the way things played out, like you were correct in your assessment that this was like a Mayweather-McGregor type event?
I still think, okay. Well, first off, we still don't have all the mail-in votes in.
You're not answering my question.
Okay.
It's a very simple question.
I wasn't the one doing modeling for this. Hold on, let me finish. I wasn't the one doing the modeling for this. And the modeling said that, like I trust a lot of what Nate Silver does. And, his margins were including the mail-in balloting, which isn't all in yet. So I don't know where the margin will be relative to the predicted margin in some of these states. But I still think that, yes, I had an edge. I think that, and the combination of an edge and the ability to get a lot down was why it's such a big event, such a once in a blue moon event.
You thought you had a very large edge, right? You didn't just think you had an edge.
I mean, I didn't think it was minus 500 though.
Well, what did you think it was? Because that's essentially what Nate was saying. It was should have been minus 900, right?
Well, okay, but that's without the shenanigans, like
that's fine. He gave the shenanigans like a 10% chance.
So that would be 25%. So minus 300.
Okay. That's still a pretty significant edge.
That's a pretty significant edge.
So do you think that was like the right, I'm asking you, like going back now after seeing how this played out.
Okay.
Do you still feel
last 24 hours ago, I did not think that. Now I do, looking back, and I feel like I totally overreacted. And I was not educated enough to know that Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, we would see what we would see at the beginning would be election day votes, and the mail-in votes, which are heavily Democratic, wouldn't be counted until later. I didn't know the difference.
Well, I mean, right?
I learned a lot election night. I wasn't live betting this for that reason. I mean, I didn't have, I hadn't studied all this stuff.
Well, you're kind of hilarious tonight because you're like cherry picking revisionist. I mean, you did put a big bet on it that wasn't based on you studying anything. It was based on Nate's numbers.
It's based on Nate's numbers as well as some other stuff. So, I mean, Nate's numbers would not have favored Trump in Texas, a position I had before we had Seth on, and I was very glad that he was on the same side there.
Okay, so let's talk about a few things, right?
So Wait, I want to know first off, what do you think? Do you think I had an edge?
I never thought it was. We were on this podcast, I don't know, a month ago or whatever, and we talked about this, and I said I thought it was like a 50. I thought it was closer to 50-50. I don't know if you remember, and like the whole situation with Nate on Twitter where he was talking about, you know, the market's not being particularly smart or whatnot. And then, you know, I to counter your points on this being Mayweather McGregor, right? Every sharp that we know was on Mayweather, right?
Yep.
And every sharp, right? So,
and where did the book? And did the books have liability on McGregor? Right. I think they did.
Did they have Yeah, of course.
The books were taking heavily McGregor action.
So in this case, right, there were sharps, I think, a lot that were on Trump.
I mean, I know my buddy Mark Ed Teach was on Trump, but aside from that, I don't know anybody else any other bettors that or people that bet for a living that were on Trump. At least not that.
You know, literally only know one.
Yeah, I know a lot of bettors that were on Biden.
Interesting.
I mean, I think Empire Maker had like had like a ton of money on him.
Just keep poking the bear, Rufus. Just keep poking the bear.
Well, he's going to be a very rich man. He already is a very rich man.
Okay, so back to this whole idea. Okay, you want me to answer your question? Is that what you're saying?
No. Well, you clearly.
So I never thought it was that. I never thought it was that. And when last night when Florida opened up that way it did, and the betting market reacted the way it did, I did think it was over. I thought Trump was going to win. I was at dinner and trying to like kind of avoid things and then maybe come watch it when I got home. And I was obviously checking this stuff on my phone. And when I saw, I think Cheetah and I were texting, and when it popped to like whatever Trump minus 200 or minus 300, whatever it did, I thought it was over for sure.
It felt like 2016 when it went and just kept going and then didn't go back. It stabilized.
So I didn't follow 2016 as closely to remember. I just remember, like, especially from a betting market standpoint, I didn't follow it. But I remember kind of watching the television and seeing all of those states with Trump leading, right? And I think, you know, okay, so how, like, it's interesting to talk about how the night went on, right? Because when Trump popped at sort of like minus 300, I think he got up to like minus 500.
He got to minus 700 at one book.
Yeah. So he got up as far, and then Biden started to come back. And when Fox called Biden to take Arizona, right, which they did obviously very prematurely.
Yeah, too early.
At this point now, we're not even sure if he's going to get Arizona for sure. And it probably isn't going to matter. So, you know, it is what it is. But when that happened, all of a sudden Biden came back into the minus 200 range, right? Sorry, into the plus 200 range, or Trump got in the minus 200 range, and you know, and then everything started slowing down. Obviously, I stayed up until about midnight my time, which is roughly about when you went to bed.
Yeah.
When I went to bed at midnight, because of all of the sort of, you know, the areas that hadn't reported. So there were two things, right? There were mail-in ballots, and then the areas that were underreported were typically areas that were very blue.
Yeah.
Right. The suburbs, the smaller places, that's what got reported early and done. And those were much more red. So the blue and the market, right? And so this is probably the most interesting part of this conversation, if we can ever get to it, which is, were the markets, like, why were the markets so bad? Why did they overreact so much? And is this an indictment on markets generally and their ability to predict events? You know, I saw people on Twitter tweeting about that, and I'm sure Nate is going to do a victory lap around markets. Not, you know, I think he even said something like, this hasn't been a good night. Like he said something like that to Justin Wolfers.
I was going to ask, I saw that. I was going to ask you if you thought Nate should be taking a victory lap. Like, how does Nate come out of this looking? Like, you know, it's at 9 p.m. yesterday, everybody was like, Nate's not going to have a job. Let's crucify him. and now he's taking a victory lap. Do you think?
I think Nate he's become too much of a
pundit.
He's just too much of like he's his own like worst enemy at this point, right? Because he makes these predictions and then he has to sort of stick with them till the bitter end. And it was hard for me to trust him during the time when I was looking for any hope, right? That Biden had a chance, because I felt like he had lost a lot of credibility because I thought he was so married to his predictions. Like I remember reading him saying something like, you know, if this is still, and what's interesting is in many ways what happened last night is what people predicted was going to happen, right? Which was that Trump was going to look like a winner when we all went to bed, but yet somehow the betting markets forgot about that. Like,
well, I think I don't think it's just that, Jeff. I mean, I think that's part of it, but I think we lost sight of that in the fact that I saw there was a big play a second ago, by the way, for you, but in the fact that when Florida came in and Biden way underperformed the polls, I think that there was that notion that, okay, Biden underperforms in Florida, he's likely to underperform elsewhere because polling errors are correlated. And it turns out, like, you know, Miami-Dade and Cuban vote went more for Trump. And it turns out that didn't sort of portend badly for Biden in other areas of the country. But we didn't know that at the time. And so when Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina at that time looked so good, and I remember seeing them on the New York Times needle, those are the 3 needle states. I think people thought, oh, the polls were wrong again across the board.
Well, and you don't think they were. You think what it's going to end up having is the margin of error in the polls is going to be within what we would have thought they'd be.
I think reasonably so. Yeah. I mean, I think Trump still overperformed the polling. I think we can say that. If not, if not, you're saying, oh, it was a 90% chance the whole way, basically, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say, because if you break any of these moments into, you know what I mean? Like if you break any of the moments at the moment, it feels, you know, different than depending on when.
Yep.
You know, like right now, especially if it ends up that he gets, you know, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, you know, he flipped a lot of states, and he will win in that case, you know, Arizona, and Georgia and Pennsylvania. It's going to be a pretty dominant win, and it's going to look like a pretty dominant win, right?
Michigan and Wisconsin too. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, those are already called, right?
Right.
So
okay.
I'm talking about the ones that aren't called yet. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's fascinating because, again, like ultimately, do you think this is an indictment on markets or not? Like, what's your take?
Okay, so I think the live betting market is different than the I'm calling it a pregame betting market. First off, though, remember, like, think about the Tampa Bay Bucks New York Giants game on Monday night. That was a 13-point spread. I think the money line was like minus 500, no vig, and guess what? The Giants were winning at halftime. Nobody was like, would we say, oh, you know, the live odds were probably like, I mean, there was a point when the Giants were a pick or a small favorite. I remember that, but I don't think anybody was like, the point spreads are broken. It's because this is such a rare, isolated event, this election. And so we make a lot. I mean, you're going to have games where one team's minus 300 at one point and plus 300 another point, first off.
That's a different animal, though, because in the one case, there's known information. You know, this team is legitimately winning by X. We're like,
right, but we're making decisions based on the information we have. And so here, I think
it's not a good analogy.
I'm saying, I think markets were making information. I guess markets as a whole were making a decision or a price based on the information they had at the time, but I think they weren't factoring in other information. I think we can clearly say that right now. But
they did not know how to interpret the results.
Right. And so think of, like, the fact is, how often, Jeff, have we seen election results come in during a weird, unusual pandemic election where votes are not coming in at the same time in the same ways as they have been before.
So Rufus, so the whole point of a market, right, is it's supposed to be able to, because of diverse thought and because of monetary incentive, it's supposed to be able to capture information that models can't, right? Because of diverse thought and because of just, all of these different, the wisdom of the crowds, right? So this is like the classic case of where a market should have been able to overperform, right? A model. I don't think it's fair for you to like excuse the market based on the fact that this is like a very rare occurrence.
No, I mean, I think there isn't.
I was
but
listening
it's true.
to so let me finish. So
I think you make a good point.
What's that?
You make a good point, but I will let you finish.
There's a podcast that Phil Hellmuth was on. It's called the All In Podcast, and it's with like Jason Kilcannon, a bunch of tech people, and Chamath Palihapitiya. But Hellmuth was on there, and I listened to the beginning of this podcast today, and they were doing a live podcast last night, like as it was happening, and they were talking about the betting odds. Let's not talk about the fact that at one point they quoted Bovada, which I was like, okay, these guys are real.
What are Bovada limits?
Betting markets, but they were talking about it, and Phil Hellmuth basically said, someone's out there, they're betting millions of dollars or 800K, like 800 pounds, whatever it was, because I think he was looking at Betfair.
Okay.
And he was basically saying like, these people know something that no one else knows. They have information. They're trading on this information, and they know something that no one else does. I mean, and he said that so definitively in this podcast, and I'll go back and listen to it and try to like see how it progresses. But essentially, when we see something like that, you and I in a market, like I'm telling you how I interpret those. When I saw those numbers pop to Trump minus 300, minus 400, I was like, this shit is over.
That was my thought as well, Jeff. I still think like looking at a market is going to be the best indicator we have. Would you agree with that?
But it's yes, and
for the reasons you said.
But so all night, right? I was refreshing Chris and looking at what the market was to interpret, to sort of like, that was like me checking the score of a game.
I was doing the same exact thing.
Yeah. So
I was doing that, and also Betfair.
Right. So we obviously placed a lot of, and the market very much led, I think, what the public opinion was, meaning it was a leading indicator of it. It would capture what the public opinion was of the race. And so I don't know if you had this same experience, but I went to bed and Trump was like minus 250, and I woke up and Biden was minus 250 or minus 300.
I had virtually the same experience.
And
I was talking with Matt Davidow last night. Actually, he was looking at the Great Lakes states, Michigan, Wisconsin, actually in Pennsylvania, so Rust Belt, but and basically saying that it looks like there it was minus 250 Trump in all those states, and there wasn't enough votes coming in to sort of make up that difference. And I wake up in the morning and both of those already are blue.
Yeah.
So it was a huge about face.
And it's interesting because last night before I went to bed, I had read enough and almost convinced myself that there was a chance because of like the way, and if you watched, so I will give Fox News credit over CNN. It was a much better watch than CNN. And they did analyze all of the precincts that, or whatever, the areas that were still had a lot to report and how much was available there. And that's why they didn't call some of these states, even though it looked like Trump had won. So I went to bed actually thinking that Biden had a chance, but I really didn't because the market was so skewed, right? And I didn't if I really thought Biden had a chance, I would have put something on Biden at plus 220 or whatever I could have done before I went to bed. I obviously didn't really think Biden had a chance.
You thought Biden had a chance, but you didn't think your domain knowledge was enough to, like, you thought there was something that somebody else knew that you didn't know. You thought the market was sharper than you were there. I felt the exact same way.
Yeah.
Although I convinced Matt Davidow to bet Biden at like plus 200 or something for Michigan last night, but
no, I mean, Preston and I were talking about it, and we were just like, we should be betting Biden right now. Like, this is just like when we see a line pop that we don't agree, like when the Seattle game this weekend, right? We were like, when that game went down to pick 'em, were you just like, what the hell's going on here? It went down to minus 115 at one point.
Yeah.
Seattle. I mean, it was crazy, right? And it's like, what is going on? And do they really think that Seattle not having, Chris Carson is that big of a deal? Because that's the only thing it could have been, right? That made that pop so much. Or were people just so bought into the Niners at that point?
I don't know. I personally more bought into was.
Yeah, I mean, most people I know added Seattle at that point, right? Most sharps.
I had taken San Fran plus 3.5. I didn't add.
Did you bet out of it when Seattle. It got to 1?
No, but I did have a Seattle second half position, so I ended up the net even for that game.
Oh, Seattle's second half must have felt good.
Yeah. But Jeff, back to what you were saying though. So these sort of insane line moves we had, and you basically said that markets are supposed to take into account all this information. There could be people with inside information, basically aggregating all this information. The wisdom of the crowds is going to give us a more efficient market. But I still do think a market where there is more information available is going to have a more efficient price and less crazy movements.
Yeah.
I think looking back, a lot of people, markets can be irrational. And I think clearly it was a little bit irrational for sure last night.
I know you care, but I'm about to win this under. So
well done.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to make of it at the end of the day. And I don't know ultimately what this was a prediction market of the election and it had wild swings, which I don't know, I don't know if we end up saying like Nate gets a victory lap. But I don't know how well Nate really handled it because he wasn't strong in the face of adversity. I mean, I think if we look through his tweets, he was basically kind of just holding on to hope that Biden had a chance, but certainly wasn't like definitive in his. There wasn't. Did you find anyone on Twitter?
He's not supposed to be definitive. He's supposed to be probabilistic.
Well, I would have liked someone to have explained pretty well to me, like at that moment. And there were some people, I guess, that did on Twitter, but generally, like the idea that even though at that moment, right? And again, like the market is processing whatever information it has and then interpreting it. And the problem is, I don't think there wasn't enough diverse thought. And I wonder if there had been one market versus there was a bunch of different markets, right? There was like the Forex, the crypto market. Mm-hmm. There was the predictive market. There was the Betfair market, and then there was like the offshore books. And they had different prices at different times.
And they also,
I wonder if you had consolidated those markets, and put everyone in there, whether they would have been a little bit more even and more accurate.
Well, the other thing you have to consider is that the offshores had a ton of liability on Trump before election night. And so if anything, they would want to skew prices a little bit towards Trump to get some Biden support there.
Yeah, maybe. So maybe that's not a good prediction market because it's not predicting at that point. It's actually trying to like balance a position.
Or not take too much exposure on one side. But at the same time, if you looked at Betfair, there wasn't a ton of volume on Betfair for the most part. I mean, at times I looked, I was like, okay, 5,000 here, 7,000 there, 20,000 there. It wasn't.
So do you think Nate's right that the the election markets aren't good markets? I mean, essentially you do believe that because
no. I mean,
no, but just think about it.
I believe the prediction markets were closer to right than Nate.
Okay, but here's what I'm saying though.
I believe Nate was directionally right.
You were willing to bet into that market in ways that you wouldn't have bet into a different market. And you were willing to bet into it because you believed that it was wrong. You believed it was populated with public money.
Yes, I did.
And you believed that like a lot of people were betting it.
Yep. So, there was a ton. I knew that books were taking, I bet into it before I knew this, but I knew that books had big liability on Trump, basically. I mean, there was a ton of action coming in on Trump.
So do you understand what I'm saying though? You essentially are echoing Nate with your actions.
No, I'm not saying the markets are completely wrong. I'm saying the
Well,
markets.
you were willing to bet into it in something that you
Yes.
don't know
Yes.
particularly well.
Okay, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not saying that Nate was more right than the market. I think the market was more right than Nate, but I think Nate was directionally correct. I think he had enough signal that the market wasn't incorporating because for various reasons. It was not, I didn't think it was a particularly sharp market, as we talked about with like the World Cup and the Super Bowl, that effect.
I mean, I think the real question with all of this is, if you go back to polling, and I think that conversation we had with Seth about the Trafalgar Group and the idea that the polling data is so bad, right? Like, I think we all believe that there has to become something a bit more scientific that to generate data for election predictions than the way they do polling right now.
Yeah, there's biases. There's certain people are more likely to, answer their phones or fill out internet surveys.
I mean, do
whatever.
You have any idea
it's a lot harder. Back in the day, you could just call and everybody just had a landline and that was it. And people didn't have caller ID. It's just who answers the phone. And now it's a lot more difficult.
Do you have any idea what the indicators that our friend Ed Teach had that made him want to bet all these different, Trump, pro-Trump?
I know he's a huge Trump supporter and believes that the media is very biased.
And right, but he said he made some indication that he has a bunch of information that other people don't have.
He believes the shy Trump voter theory.
Okay, so what are his indicators though?
I don't think he had any actual data indicators.
He said he did. He indicated that.
I'm sure. He said a lot of things. I have a lot of respect for Ed, Mark, but we were on different sides here.
Yeah, I mean, and I texted you that I was like, I mean, he has a real strong confirmation bias in his analysis of things, I feel like. And for someone that is obviously smart and a very critical thinker and good at, spotting a bunch of these opportunities as an advantage player, I think his after the fact narratives and confirmation biases are a little.
We all have those to some extent though. But
yeah, his personality on Twitter is one of persona on Twitter, which is like, again, like he was a perfectly delightful guy on our podcast, and every interaction I've had with him since has been great. But the whole Brady thing obviously has like creased me and put me on tilt, and then even just this like Herbert versus Tyrod Taylor thing, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, because he was a big advocate of Tyrod before,
and now he's like
before the season.
Now and now the 2-5 Chargers that are.
I mean, but we get new information and we process that information. We develop new viewpoints, and I think that, I think you'd have to be crazy to think that Tyrod is better than Herbert right now, probably, right?
I don't know. I guess, yeah. I mean, Herbert did throw a pretty critical interception that allowed that team to lose that game, and he's done a lot of great things.
They're the Chargers.
Herbert had something like he had like a ridiculous amount of interceptions in college, right?
Yeah, he made some boneheaded throws at times in college,
and that's like the whole notion of Tyrod, right? Tyrod is he
doesn't throw a lot of picks.
Steady and slow wins the race, right?
Pretty conservative.
Do you want to talk about is the election completely over? It's now on Chris. It's minus 900 on the no for Trump. What's interesting is Georgia's minus 255 for the Dems, and Pennsylvania's minus 733 for the Dems.
I'll tell you what. To me, the minus 900 doesn't seem to make sense relative to the state markets. So the minus 900 Biden for the general election, given the fact that Biden's minus 733 favorite plus 455 comeback in Pennsylvania, and minus 255 plus 197 comeback in Georgia. I mean,
so you're thinking the minus 900 should be even more?
Yeah, I think again, they do have a lot of liability on Trump, I think. So they're happy to take.
Should we just put some more Biden on right now at minus 900?
I'm not going to. I was talking to my business partner earlier today, and he was basically like this morning, or actually I wasn't awake in the morning, but early afternoon, when it was minus 350 or so. And he basically was like, if I didn't have any position, I'd be adding a ton right now of Biden at minus 350. But we're not adding because
I took a little of my. I have to sadly admit I took a little Biden off the table when it was plus 390 on Trump at one point, like this afternoon, or no, it wasn't even this afternoon. It was this morning where I was like, man, there's still so much uncertainty that seems like a reasonable place to take off a little bit of exposure.
Wait, so you had a big Biden position?
I didn't have a big Biden position, but I had a Biden position from like, I think I've told you this from the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
It was Biden at plus money from the beginning of COVID because I was basically like, Trump is going to mishandle this and it's going to be his Waterloo, right? It's going to be his COVID. Like he's going to,
COVID will be his COVID.
And I contend that honestly, that I don't think this would have been as close if the George Floyd thing hadn't happened.
I agree.
I think that George Floyd thing caused a lot of uneasiness by what would have been Biden voters about the sort of law and order stuff, because like people were worried, and people are worried about themselves more than anything, and you can't blame them to some degree, and that caused a lot of uneasiness by people.
It gave Republicans a message.
Yeah, it gave
them a message that gave them a message that it
gave them a message that resonates.
It renovates my house.
It gave them a message that renovates your house.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk football.
Fear is a powerful motivator.
You want to talk football?
Let's do it.
You said your colleges sucked this year.
Yeah.
Or what? So then you don't mind giving it out because this is a pretty big slate this week.
Is it? I literally haven't looked since Monday. So,
what do you make Notre Dame, Clemson?
Okay. Without Trevor Lawrence.
Oh wait, Trevor Lawrence isn't playing?
He is not. Or at least he wasn't on Monday. As I said, I haven't looked at it since Monday. So I make that number. I mean, he's not playing for Clemson. I make it Clemson minus 3.8.
So wow, really? So there's a little bit of value on Notre Dame at plus 6.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna bet it. I don't think it's enough. But
I'm love to bet on Notre Dame, but maybe that line will go up. Any college that jumped out at you that you played?
Let me see what I need to actually look and see what current lines are now, because I might be giving you a price.
Just throw some out.
Let's see, what did I play? I played Western Kentucky, which gave me a push last week. I got it at 31. This week I got. Let me see.
Are they like the Jets of college football?
Damn, closing line value. Actually, not closing line. Midweek line value. I got it at plus 10, and now it's plus 6.5. Maybe my college isn't worthless. At least that game isn't. I bet. Finding them. I bet Texas. I took them at.
Everyone and their mom was on Texas last week, and that was like a nice game to pull out.
I took Texas at a price of minus 6.5 and minus 7. And it is currently minus 6.5. So I've not gotten good line movement there. I took a little bit of Georgia. Again, I did not get good line movement there. I took it at 4, and it's now 3. That's very bad.
Okay.
I played UNLV. I played that at 13.5, 13 and 12. It is now. I'm literally doing this and finding out live. So I minus 11. Okay. It could be either embarrassing or validating. I don't know. Illinois is off the board. I played a little bit of Penn State actually. And at 24, that's 25 now. I'm literally just going through exactly. CLV. I mean, this is a mixed bag here. Tulane. I took Tulane at 3.5 and 4, and that is now 5.
Yay!
A very meaningful point. 5. A lot of games to land there. And unfortunately, I took Northern Illinois at 10-11, and it closed at 15. So I
And
think
lost.
and lost. So I think my sharp card needs to be revoked if it ever existed. I don't know how. Was there some news there? I mean, this is the first game for both these teams, and I know
Was there some news about your sharp card? No, I don't
Northern
think you ever got
Illinois.
a sharp card.
And I know
sorry.
Cheetah was on the same side as me there.
Cheetah just took it for shits and giggles because he wanted some action. I think he probably took it because you had it also.
Okay, well, he told me he agreed with it, so, and that was when it was 10. But I don't know what we didn't know, but it clearly was something meaningful.
Maybe it was that most of the precincts that hadn't reported were actually blue.
Maybe.
Okay, let's move on to the NFL.
How did you do last week in the NFL?
Okay, not great. I ended okay, so I think that made it feel okay. So I had in the late games, if the Saints had scored a touchdown in overtime, I would have swept the late games and my second halves in the late games because I had Denver +3. I had the over in the second half of the Denver game. I had the over in the second half of the Saints game. I had the Saints and the Saints -3 in the second half, and I had the Saints -4 in the game.
That's a lot of numbers.
And I had Seattle also in that game. I had Seattle at bad line value. I think I had Seattle -3 even. I managed to get the only -3 that was probably available all week. That's when they took my sharp card away.
Okay.
How did you do last week?
I think we made a little bit. We had Minnesota, which was nice.
But for the record, I had a bunch of losers in the morning too, so that's
Minnesota was nice. The Jets was a loss. San Francisco was a loss. Denver was a very lucky win, and the Giants were a win that was less lucky.
Oh man, I wish I knew you had the Giants. I was like looking for any reason to bet on the
everybody
Giants.
Everybody was on the Giants. I felt like that line just I don't know.
It went up
that
to
was
13.
calling to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we might have even gotten 13.5. It might have just been.
That was
13.
kind of obvious.
I don't remember. It seemed pretty obvious at the time. No, we got it at 13, but we bet it the day of it. Yeah. I don't think the Giants aren't that bad. And if you watch the game, Daniel Jones had a bunch of opportunities that he missed downfield. He missed a bunch of throws where he had wide open receivers deep.
He may not be very good.
He may not. And those two interceptions were awful.
When do we fire on the 49ers? Like they're +7 at home, +110 now.
Yeah, I love that. But I mean, is the game back on the board because it was off earlier?
It's on the board, but there's a lot of guys that aren't.
It's the COVID thing. There's the COVID thing. I mean,
sure. Well, they already have a ton of injuries, right?
On their practice facilities closed, or was closed this week because of COVID.
I wonder, what do you think though? Like it's a short week already, anyways. So does that really hurt them as much as it would? Because it's not like the Packers are doing very much on a short week, right?
Yeah, I don't think they're like practicing in pads or anything like that. But walk through and
they've got it, and the Packers had to travel.
Plan. Yeah, I mean, do people pay as much attention in Zoom meetings as they do in person? Probably.
See what
not.
I did there? I was acting like I wasn't paying attention because we're on a Zoom meeting.
So
okay.
I agree. I mean, I agree that number's too high. Personally, with Mullins, I make it a pick. So
I bet Mullins makes it a pick too. Get it?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm higher on San Francisco than most people. They do have that year after Super Bowl loss hangover. It's real. It happens every year, it seems like.
I mean, the reason is because they're just missing so many guys.
Yeah, I know.
Kittle's out. Deebo Samuel's going to be out. Ayuk's going to be out. I know you don't care about wide receivers. I think Ayuk is on the COVID list.
Yeah.
All right.
So 7 is still a lot of points, and you're right. My pick number wasn't adjusting for
7. It's
Kittle
7 plus
stuff.
110. It's not even 7. It's like a 7.5, a solid 7.5.
Right. I think perception's greater than reality there. Like how healthy are their lines?
Their defensive line is not healthy, right?
But that's been the case most of the season.
Yeah. Okay.
What else you got?
We like Seattle minus the 2.5. It's like -3 even right now over the Bills.
Yeah, we took a little +3 on Sunday, actually. There's a note here for my partner that says bet Sunday, because like I make it 1.5 basically. So I don't think that's a big edge. I don't know why he bet it. I think he thought that we would like it more.
Wait, you make it -1.5 and you bet Seattle?
No. I bet Buffalo +3.
Oh yeah, we like Seattle.
Yeah.
So we like the opposite side.
We're opposite. So for anybody tracking our picks, we're going to eat the juice
Touts.
We're going to eat the juice.
The Titans minus the 6. Oh, actually, sorry. We don't like Seattle. Cheetah likes Seattle.
Okay.
I don't think we have Seattle.
Do you like Minnesota? Oh,
No,
hell yes. I got in on Minnesota at -3, -117, and now Stafford's out due to COVID precautions. I don't think he even tested positive. He was just like hanging out with somebody that had COVID or something. So that line is now still only 4, or is it just off the board?
It's off the board. I bet.
Okay.
I bet.
I was like, no respect.
Now you're like rubbing this in my face because I bet the Lions at +4, and I didn't know why it was off the board. And I'm now gonna have to like start Cam Newton this week in fantasy.
Jeff, you should be able to list your quarterbacks like you used to be able to list pitchers.
Yeah, that's true. In the COVID day, we like the Titans minus the 6. You probably like the Bears.
No opinion. Let me see. I'm trying to find it. No, I mean I lean towards the Titans. I make it -7.1.
Yeah.
There
was some 5.5 showed, I think, like earlier.
What do you think of Arizona, Miami?
We don't have a play there.
You don't. That's one I like more than most.
You like Arizona?
Love Arizona. It's I mean
Miami's coming off.
Did you see how weird that game was?
Yeah, of course.
The Rams ran 92 offensive plays in a non-overtime game. That's got to be some kind of record. They had more than 3 times Miami's yards. Miami had only 8 first downs and 145 yards. And Miami's longest drive was 33 yards. And yet they won the game in a blowout, like a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown. And Tua didn't look very good.
We love the Saints.
Arizona coming off a bye week too.
We love the Saints.
We love the Saints as well. What do you make that number?
Oh, I don't know I'll have to look it up. I'm assuming you make it like pick 'em or something?
Tampa -1. So yeah, basically. I think Tampa's a very good team. I think them and the Saints are really close.
Are the Saints the best team in the league still?
Don't think so. Kansas City.
We like the Texans, which is odd to me, but I'm assuming it's because the quarterback.
You like the Texans. I'm trying to even find this game.
You're not gonna like. There's no way you're gonna like them.
I make it -7.7
with the backup quarterback.
Yeah. Well, Deshaun Watson's playing, and not for Clemson.
No, Luton is playing for the Jags.
For the Jags, exactly.
Yeah.
Luton. You make it when you say Luton, I think Joost Luiten, the golfer from where is he from?
That's like, weird. That's not what I think at all.
It's the Netherlands.
What anyone else? Any other games for you?
No. New Orleans, Arizona, Minnesota, Buffalo are the ones I'm on. Actually, I don't know why. I think my partner bet Jets +7.5 on Sunday, just assuming we would like it and thinking that it might drop to 7, which, it did, and then it went back up to 7.5. But we don't really actually like it. I mean, I make the number 6.4, so it's a lean. But this wouldn't be, I'm not. My numbers don't like the Jets this week.
I'm gonna have to come up with some other plays for the Tony Kornheiser show.
Have you just been saying Jets and Saints every time, and then?
I mean, last week I was like
Bill Rufus.
Last week I was headed to 0-5, and then Seattle pulled through, and Denver pulled that horseshoe out of their ass. What do you think is happening?
Have you seen how bad the Jets? They were last in game grades last week. The week before they were third to last. The week before that they were last. Like they've been basically right at the bottom every single week, and they're actually plus in turnover differential this year. They're so bad, and they've actually been kind of lucky.
Their badness has finally caught up to them.
Which
to you?
I don't know. I mean, speaking of like lucky, have you seen where the Saints are in terms of penalty yard differential?
They're getting murdered.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, they had their first week where they were not negative in that category, or I guess positive, more yards, penalty yards, but they have their penalty yard differential is minus 310. Second worst is the Ravens at minus 184. Nobody else is more than minus 100 yards.
I mean, did you have the Ravens last week?
No, I didn't have anything there.
We had the Ravens and Cheetah had the Ravens, and that was a funny game, right? Because they basically gifted the Steelers 14 points.
They did. But I still actually had – so I still had the Steelers with a better game grade there, despite – yeah.
Interesting.
You're right. The Ravens, though, yeah, they're -3 turnover margin. They were penalized 80 more yards. But
what do you make the Chargers-Raiders game?
I got to get away from my game grade sheet. Chargers-Raiders is Raiders minus 0.3. So pick. What do you make that?
We don't show any value there.
Yeah, I don't show value either.
Any other
any themes from the NFL we want to talk about? Or gambling world?
I mean,
never.
Where are you on the Patriots narrative now? I mean, like, they played a reasonable game against Buffalo, and obviously had a real chance to win that game if Cam doesn't fumble that ball. I guess we'll see if they come out. It's interesting because if they win that game against Buffalo, they're 3-4, and then they win this game against the Jets, they're 4-4. They're like right back in the division. And I think our opinion of Miami right now is they're not particularly good, even though they've won some games.
Exactly.
Yeah, the NFC. I mean, like, what's the Tampa situation? Didn't play particularly well on Monday night. Everyone was kind of anointing them as the top team in the NFC potentially. I guess this is like the big showdown, right? Like, if the Saints win this, they're in the inside.
Tiebreaker.
They have that tiebreaker.
They sweep the head-to-heads. What was weird to me was that after that Giants game, that line went up. It went up to 6 on Tuesday morning. It's now down to 5 and 4.5 at some places.
It's gonna close closer to 3, I would bet.
You think 3?
Well, I mean, now it's in that
maybe 3.5 or 4. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Closer to 3, right? Now that's in that range where if it moves at all, it's going to drop. Probably would be my guess.
Okay, Mr. Line Whisperer.
I mean, just me and Fezzik, we both know where the line's going to move.
Hey, you got that information.
Yeah,
you understand the numbers.
I do. I mean, anything else? I mean, just all of this strangeness with COVID and injuries. And did you hear this thing that they might just add another playoff team?
Yeah, I mean, can you do that mid-season? I guess you can do whatever
you probably have to return all the futures, right?
Ooh, that's a good question. The playoff futures. I mean, that shouldn't affect regular season wins. I don't think that shouldn't affect Super Bowl futures, should it? Just the make or miss playoffs?
I don't know, man. Definitely make or miss playoffs.
I'll say it probably depends on what the book's liabilities are, right?
Don't say that.
That was a joke.
You're just a negative Nelly, Rufus. You're a negative Nelly.
A joke. Not every book would do that.
How about the unders? The unders are making a big comeback because of weather now, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's actually something we're talking about. The insane windy games last week.
Yeah.
And I think Minnesota Green Bay, that line was 54.5 and moved down to 48. And what did it end up at? The 52 points scored, or is that it?
28-14.
40. It was 49. I think it was just a bunch of touchdowns, right? Was it 28?
It was 28-22, 50 points.
50 points. Okay, so there was a 2-point conversion, right?
Yeah, the Packers did the right thing.
Yeah, they did. They should be applauded. But that was you heard a lot of people talking about weather trends at that point, like, games with 20 plus mile an hour winds go under X% of the time. And I actually went through and sort of looked. I was like, I want to see these sort of crazy weather games, where the line opened and where the line closed. And I didn't do a real scientific study because I don't have opening lines in my database, but I looked up I actually went one by one for maybe like 15 games and looked it up. And what's funny is some of these games, like there were from like 2007, I see like no line move or a half a point. And the weather says like 30-mile-an-hour wind or 27-mile-an-hour wind at the stadium in the box score, which makes me kind of doubt that was actually the case. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't really see a situation where there was a 27-mile-an-hour wind and the line didn't move from the opener, the total.
I mean, we ended up in the first round of games with the second half over in Cleveland and the second half over in the New England Bills game.
But not Minnesota Green Bay.
But not Minnesota Green Bay.
Yeah, I had the second half under there because that was such a weird first half where Green Bay it was every drive was a touchdown drive, but both teams were just running the ball while the Packers.
We had
and the Packers converted 2 of 2 fourth downs. Basically, everybody's converting their third and fourth downs. That's what was happening.
We had the Packers in the game, if you remember, and then we ended up with the Vikings in the second half to set up a nice Polish middle for ourselves. But thank God the Vikings.
You can't say that. It's racist. I said it on Twitter and people got upset at me.
Polls. Poles. Poles middle. You saw that, right? That
like Santa.
Trump was talking about the polls closing and he spelled it Poles.
Yeah. You can't go to the South Pole anymore. Not after the election closes. That's not a thing.
Why were you adverse to us making fun of Trump bettors?
Why was I?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not
gonna make fun of Trump bettors until like the whole thing's done, but at that point I will.
I thought he meant like Trump supporters, like politically or something. I mean,
no, I think he meant bettors. I think he was talking about Teach.
Look, not everybody makes the right call every time.
The thing about the one thing that you would say is that the Trump bettors last 2016 were especially annoying and obnoxious after 2016.
I was a Trump better in 2016.
You weren't annoying and obnoxious about it, but there were a fair amount of people that were.
I think at that time I had like 3,000 Twitter followers and really wasn't tweeting much and was a lot happier.
I'm just saying your own personality. Yeah, you were a lot happier. People didn't constantly.
Well, the problem with Twitter and social media in general is it just is such a distraction and it makes it so much harder to be productive. When I'm working, I just need to put it away for a while. And sometimes I'm good at doing that and sometimes I'm not.
Sorry, I was checking Instagram. Anyways, all right.
I got that one, Jeff. I got that one.
Good. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back next week with our guest that we were going to have this week. We were trying to find the toutiest tout we could, but we couldn't find one. So next week we'll have a really big tout, a former tout.
Were there election touts? Were there people that were touting for the election markets?
There should have been.
I want to know what Vegas Dave's pick was. Who was was he martingaling all the states
as they came in?
He was like saying, I think he was on.
It was crazy though how quickly
he was on. He says you should parlay Trump in West Virginia at -5,000, at Arkansas -5,000, et cetera, et cetera.
It was crazy how quickly they took down a lot of those state by state markets.
I mean, what information do they have? I think.
What do you mean? But I think they were really worried they were really worried at one point when the Trump stuff started happening that they were just going to get picked off.
Yeah. I mean, I would be worried too. Like Betfair is the place that, Betfair doesn't have to worry about that, but there were market makers on Betfair that are worried about that. And that's why you saw less liquidity there.
Fewer liquidity, you mean?
Fewer liquidities.
Fewer liquidity.
Less liquids, more gases.
Okay. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Sayonara.
On this week's Bet the Process podcast, Rufus and I recap our time with Mr. Seth Burn and give you guys a tutorial on Cville. Then we go into painstaking detail about election betting and try to make a decision about whether Nate Silver is still a witch or whether he's no longer a witch. And then we do a little bit of NFL, and we even give out some college picks, but Rufus thinks his college picks aren't worth shit this season, so just keep that in mind. And with that, let's start the process.